Hello, I'm Casey Aiken, and this is 21 This Week. Coming up next, Montgomery County to receive up to 3,000 unaccompanied minors from the latest border surge. Recently released emails from Dr. Travis Gayles cause a controversy. Adam Pagnucco, former county council chief of staff, joins David Blair's campaign. And former Montgomery County council member Tom Perez and former county state's attorney Doug Gansler considers running for governor. Our panel of insiders will give you the story behind the story. We're joined by the secretary of the Maryland Republican Central Committee, Mark Uncapher, the dean of Democratic politics, Sam Statland, and guest commentator, former House of Delegates member, Maricé Morales. Stay tuned for these stories and more on the next 21 This Week. The recent surge of asylum seekers at our country's southern border has resulted once again in having unaccompanied minors being sent to sponsor families in Montgomery County. With us today to discuss the ramifications is former House of Delegate member and attorney Maricé Morales. Maricé, according to Council Member Craig Rice, families are making a really tough decision about whether or not to send their children on the precarious journey to travel to the United States to escape death, and what is almost certain death in many cases, and being forced into gangs or being killed by gangs. Bethesda Magazine reports that up to 3,000 unaccompanied minor children could be sponsored here in Montgomery County. What are the issues facing the county from receiving such a large number of children?
Sure. No, thank you again for inviting me for this important conversation, Casey. So we know that the DC area has received one of the highest numbers of unaccompanied minors nationwide. Fairfax leading that number with 184 minors, and then Montgomery County receiving 104. As an immigration attorney, I can tell you that the majority of unaccompanied minors that are reunified into our communities, 49% are reunified with an immediate relative parent. 41% are reunited with a distant family member. So it's not necessarily the case that they will be kind of just dumped into the community and then will become a burden to the county. They're reunified with parents, and the Office of Refugee and Family Reunification, ORR, they do the vetting. They identify the family prior to releasing the minor child. And so prior to them even arriving in the county, they've already gone through sort of a little bit of a labyrinth. And 90% of minors that are not represented by counsel at the border are being returned to their home countries. So just to kind of give a little bit of a context, by the time that they arrive, there's already been somewhat of a case filter and medical examinations, et cetera, et cetera. Now,
the question is always whether or not there are sufficient social services that are going to be able to provide assistance for these young minor children. Is that the case in Montgomery County? Do we have sufficient capacity?
We know that we are at capacity. We know, we've heard from our county leaders and Dr. Raymond Crowell that we are at capacity. That said, we also know that the county does want to find creative ways to provide wraparound services. But in the vast majority of cases, like I said, they're being reunified with families that are already, making their own income, et cetera. So, prior to even having some kind of status, like as I mentioned, there's going to be, first of all, there's going to be a USCIS kind of an immigration labyrinth that these young people have to go through, and then also go through a state court system where a judge will essentially grant custody to the legal parent or the family member in the county. So there is definitely a system where a judge is going to be figuring out whether this family member, parent, is going to be able to take care of this individual, and there is a sense of what like the best interest of the minor is going to be. If there's going to be enough financial assistance in the home, et cetera. So there, I understand there's a lot of confusion. When you receive these individuals and these high number of unaccompanied minors, and we're quick to kind of just assume that they're going to be, a public charge, but it really in the highest percentage of cases, they're going to be reunified with a parent that's already making their own income. They already have a job, et cetera. And a lot of these young people end up getting jobs on their own and taking care of themselves later on. So,
Maricé, what about the burden on the school system? I mean, we are coming out of a pandemic where we may not even be fully opened next September. How is that going to burden the school system?
Right. No, and that's definitely a concern. We know that 3,000 students, that's equals to one new high school, right? We've heard of those numbers, and so I know that the county leaders are talking about this. They know that they're going to need to, again, find creative ways to make sure that the county is ready. I mean, we just, all we can do is prepare. We can look at the data. We know that the numbers are staggering in comparison to other years. But at the end of the day, these are individuals who are being reunified with parents, our neighbors, people that are already here, like I said, and so we can, I'm not an expert in terms of what resources there are, but we know that at least the leaders are preparing for it and talking about how to best fit the needs of these unaccompanied minors in our schools.
Maricé, we only have a couple minutes left, and I need to bring up what critics point out. Critics point out that during the last wave of asylum seekers in 2016, that 2 years later, gang activity had increased dramatically. So is the county prepared to address this and how to prevent? I mean, if they're trying to escape gangs in their home country, are they also able to escape gang activity here?
Right. No, and as a criminal defense attorney and as an immigration attorney, this is something that's very concerning. Obviously, public safety is really important. But I also would like to take a step back. A lot of times the media make leap assumptions, that when an individual who happens to be Latino, happens to be of a certain age, that they're immediately profiled as gang members, etc. I have myself actually reached out to some of these writers from the Washington Post, and other media outlets, and I've caught them in making incredible assumptions. Even when you look at the charging documents, even though they're charged with a certain crime, gang membership was not one of them. So there's definitely room there to really explore the issue a little bit more. But just because these individuals are unaccompanied doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to end up being gang members in our communities.
No, I appreciate that. I just want to make sure that our public safety officers are prepared to deal with 3,000 new young people coming into the county, because it is an awful lot of individuals to absorb in a relatively short period of time. I want to thank you for your expertise on this matter and for being here with us today. And I hope you come back again in this capacity or some other capacity in the near future. Thank you very much, Maricé.
It's my pleasure.
When we come back from this short break, emails obtained from a Freedom of Information request between Health Officer Travis Gayles and some of his colleagues have created quite a stir. Stay tuned. You're not going to want to miss this. And welcome back. The issue regarding the reopening of local schools has been passionately debated on all sides. There is no hotter topic of debate within Montgomery County. And recently, emails obtained through the Freedom of Information Act request by Washington Examiner reporter Tim Carney has reopened the debate whether Health Officer Travis Gayles was biased against religious and non-public schools last fall. Mark, what do you know about the issue?
Well, I followed this and have also written about it for the Duck Pen, which is a blog here in Maryland. What's relevant here is that it's very clear from the exchange of email that there was no consideration of the quote science or of the plans that the schools were considering. What Gayles did is basically demonstrated bias, an antipathy towards the schools and towards the parents and towards those students as being elitist. And there was no consideration. And so, frankly, the good news was he was overruled.
Well, but even in his comments to his colleagues, he does talk about the safety of the students. Don't you think those are legitimate comments?
It was, but what was not done was a careful review of the plans that were being submitted to him about how they intended to reopen, the kind of precautions that they were taking. Now, if we're following the science, then that's precisely what we should do. What we saw was, in those emails over and over again from both him and his colleagues, what can only be described as contempt for the parents for not being, public school parents and sending their kids to.
Well, I mean, there were certainly certain comments about the affluent and the privileged coming to bear. Sam, according to the Washington Examiner, personal animus, not science, drove Montgomery County's COVID policy. And is that a fair charge?
That's absolutely not a fair charge. Not a fair charge. I think Mark has done a dynamite job of keeping us safe. And I think that the county council, which is our health commission, has acted very, very well in coordination with Mark, supporting one another to keep us healthy. And I think that all of this stuff starts with, people who had their kids in private school had the tools and the money to set up things in such a way that the kids would be safer. What I find very interesting is that not all of the private schools nor religious organizations felt that way and followed the recommendations of CDC and Dr. Gayles. So, once you blow all this little stuff away, and I consider it minor, what's the bottom line?
Well,
the bottom line is Montgomery County has the lowest infection rate within the entire state of Maryland. We're going to be able to expand. We're going to open for business. Everybody's going to be happy, and nobody's going to be worrying about this little stuff.
Mark.
Let's look at the record, because Gayles was effectively overruled by the governor, by Governor Hogan, in schools and the courts, and he was overruled and the schools opened. So we get to see the results of what their plans were, and it was remarkable success. I think there was exactly one hospitalization as a result of of which are thousands of students that are in the schools. So Gayles's consideration certainly did not do a good job of predicting how successful these schools would be with their plans.
I absolutely agree. I think you're absolutely right. But the bottom line is that everybody here in Montgomery County is healthy. The schools are opening. I think by the end of the year, we're going to have all the kids back in school, in regular school, and we're healthy and we're safer.
Sam, but the big issue is when are we the final issue is when are we going to be able to reopen normally? I mean, if everything is so safe, why won't Mark Elrich move faster to reopen the businesses and allow us to operate without restrictions? If the vaccines work, why not open up?
Mark and the health department administration, which is our county council, all are together in following more conservatively than the CDC guidelines, and the governor, who I don't think did that great a job, especially in the distribution of vaccines and opening up vaccine centers, as Montgomery County has. Yeah. We have the lowest infection rate, and we're opening. All we need at this point in time, and there's a plan, and it's laid out. Half of us now have shots. When it gets up to 60%, then we're going to open more and more and more. And I believe by July, the county is going to be just the way you want it, Casey, and you can have.
All right, so Sam, so what happens when we plateau at 58% fully vaccinated, and nobody else wants to do it anymore?
Well, I think
are we going to shut down again?
No, I think on a show like this, and every public official and everybody who really cares about this should be out there encouraging the rest of our citizens to go out and get vaccinated. Look, I've never seen another county executive go out and encourage people physically on the street. I've never seen another county executive and members of the county council out there encouraging people to get vaccinated. The only way we're going to beat this is to have everybody vaccinated as quickly as possible. And if we can do this, and I think it'll be before July 1, people, especially people who are critics like you, Casey, are going to be very, very happy.
Well, good, because I'm not happy now. Anyway, we got to go on to our next topic. And that was 3 years ago. Current county executive Mark Uncapher won a heavily contested race, narrowly defeating businessman David Blair. Now, 15 months before the next primary election, Blair's campaign has received an important addition by having the former county council chief of staff, Adam Pagnucco, join his team. Now, Sam, Pagnucco lays out a fairly compelling case that economically, the county is doing a terrible job in relationship to private employment, growth, revenue, and businesses compared to its other jurisdictions. So why should people vote for Mark Uncapher?
Well, first of all, I have to say that I really admire Adam. I love his articles. I like his blog. I wish he was still doing it because I think he gets the word out that he does. But when it comes to the statistics, it's same old, same old, same old. We've been hearing how well Virginia does. We've been hearing how this jurisdiction does, how that one's better and how this one's better. It's the same stuff we've been hearing for the last 2.5 administrations. And what has it got us? Nowhere. What Mark has done and why he's going to win this race is that he has focused on COVID. He is focusing on the economy. And once this gets squared away and we start talking about business development in Montgomery County and the projects are going on and the money that's coming in from guys like the Gates Foundation and schools for IT and development, we're going to see Montgomery County grow, and those empty office buildings up and down the 270 corridor will be full of people involved in IT and healthcare, et cetera, et cetera. I think Mark's going to win hands down.
Well, that's fascinating. Mark Uncapher, county elections, as Sam points out, aren't usually determined by poor economic performance indicators. And so is there going to be a difference this time in the Blair campaign?
Well, it remains to be seen, because I think people are probably in Montgomery County more motivated by services, and that may well be a conversation we have about Mark Uncapher. As for Adam, he is a wonderful writer. I don't like being, I've been on the wrong side of some of his articles, and it stings because he's very good. So he'll be a very effective advocate for Blair, and I think he'll do a good job of drawing out the distinction. Sam, the numbers are the numbers. They really speak for themselves. Montgomery County is lagging other jurisdictions in this area in the creation of jobs. And when you reference the empty office buildings, they're not just empty, they're not being replaced with additional ones. We're turning ourselves into a bedroom community, and Mark Uncapher seems to be just fine with that. I mean, there really doesn't seem to be the effort on economic development that there ought to be.
Look, Mark has completely reworked the Economic Development Commission, giving these guys teeth, allowing them to work, allowing them to bring business into the county and support for it. But that's not the key. Let's talk about the Blair campaign. And Mark, for a second, the biggest thing that Blair is doing that may help him is he started this race so early, and he's trying to build grassroots, which he didn't have previously. With him, his base is spending a lot of money to try to get elected. That doesn't play well in Montgomery County. What has Mark done? He's kept us safe, he's kept us healthy, and before we get into this election, you are going to see growth in economic development. Mark really hasn't even started a campaign. Mark is more concerned about Montgomery County, the health, the citizens, and economic growth and the school system than he is about his own reelection.
Sam, I gotta cut you off, and I want to say, as we end this segment, this political message was brought to you by Uncapher for county executive.
He approved this message.
He approved this. He approved this message. Talking about other political campaigns, the list of prospective Democratic candidates to succeed Larry Hogan continues to grow and blossom like weeds. This week, former Secretary of Education and former County Council member Tom Perez all but gave his official announcement to campaign to Maryland Matters reporter Josh Kurtz. And then days later, former state's attorney Doug Gansler and former attorney general of the state of Maryland, Doug Gansler, announced the hiring of a campaign manager for his bid for the nomination. Now, Sam, traditionally, the county or statewide elections have been dominated by Baltimore candidates. What's going to be different this time?
The difference is Peter Franchot. I don't think anybody can say that Peter has not done a great job as our comptroller. I think he's done a wonderful job. But he's done so by building support throughout the entire state. Peter reminds me of Louis Goldstein. He's been in Western Maryland, Eastern Maryland. I'm sure he can say the names of all the counties in alphabetical order without taking a breath. And he's built grassroots supports among the Democratic base throughout the entire state. And I don't think anybody's going to touch him in the primary.
Well, he's a marvelous comptroller, but will he be woke enough to be governor in a Democratic primary? And Mark, Republicans have won 2 out of the 3 past gubernatorial elections. Can they do it again? What's the magic formula?
Two out of 3, actually, and also 3 out of the last 5. So yes, we've been fairly successful. I think that in part of the problem that Democratic candidates have had is they have been too far to the left. They haven't appealed to the center, and that's provided an opening for Bob Ehrlich and obviously Larry Hogan as well. So I think we'll be competitive. I think one of the challenges the Democrats are going to have is it's beginning to look like the presidential election. They're going to have 2-tier debates. There's going to be the A team and the B team, and they're going to have to split them off because of the number of candidates that are potentially jumping into this. And that's going to be tough for Peter Franchot.
Well, it's going to be.
Peter has really excelled, Casey, and what you're talking about is leadership, because he and the governor and the comptroller sit together and firmly do things that are meaningful to the state and Montgomery County. And for example, Peter's position on the expansion of 270 is just what we needed to keep things in perspective and pleases Montgomery County.
Well, thank you, Sam. And it's going to be great. It's going to be great fun for this show anyway, to talk about a governor's race for the next 15 months. Now, stay tuned for parting shots when we come back from this short break. Welcome back. Now with parting shots, Mark Uncapher.
Thank you, Casey. We were talking about COVID, and so I took a look at the numbers today because it is important. I agree with Sam that everybody needs to get vaccinated, and that's exactly what's happening in Maryland. We've now reached the 5 million mark. 5 million people 5 million vaccines have been distributed. 85% of people over 65 have had at least one, and 63% of people 18 or over. So Casey, I think we're gonna get past those numbers that we're talking about as a benchmark, and have been making a lot more success in getting things done.
Thank you, Mark. Sam Statland, your parting shot.
I want to pick up on exactly what Mark is talking about. So far, we have the lowest infection rate within the state. Our inoculations are higher and higher. However, we have a hardcore resistance to people getting their shots. And I want to tell everybody who's out there that listens to the show, talk as much as you can and help as many people as you can to get inoculated so that we can open our economy sooner for the better of all.
Thank you, Sam. I'm going to comment on both of your statements. I am fully in favor of everyone getting vaccinated. I couldn't wait to get vaccinated, as I've said repeatedly on this air, and was thrilled when I got the vaccination. But I'm also a civil libertarian, and I don't think anyone should be compelled to have a vaccination if they don't want one. So I think there is a balance that has to be met between people who do not want to be compelled and forced to have a vaccine and opening up our economy. So that's a critical issue that government has to address. Thankfully, I have the last word, and I want to thank you for being here today. I want to thank former state delegate Maricé Morales for being with us as our special guest. And I want to thank the audience for tuning in each and every week to Montgomery County's hardest-hitting political talk show. For 21 this week, I'm Casey Aiken.